Chillwithaster here, and welcome to a paper that I actually submitted for class. And today I'm going to be showing you the fruits of my labor from yesterday's stream. And I'm going to be showing to you my paper about the formation of parasocial relationships with fictional characters as a monetization technique in the gacha game Genshin Impact. Yeah, that's a lot of words. So, background. I'm supposed to give an argumentative essay that's around 2,000 to 3,000 words. I accidentally went through the word count about a topic that I personally like. The topic can be about anything else, but it just has something to do with my field. My course is communication research, which is why it's important for me to always think about the audience whenever they consume media. It also has something to do with the psychology of how new media affects people. So I decided that I'm going to make a paper about Genshin Impact because I need to look for a topic that's narrow enough that I can find succinct resources about the topic. And what's cool about it is that there's actually a lot of papers about this. But obviously, this doesn't only happen to Genshin Impact, and I'm not insinuating that this is a bad thing. Parasocial doesn't exactly mean that it's completely parasitic, because everyone has their form of attachments one way or another whenever we consume any kind of media. It's also important to note that this isn't a blanket statement, but instead something that's coming from a lot of literature and a lot of concepts that really do exist in the field of advertising. So if you're interested in seeing what the paper is, continue watching. Also, before I begin with this paper, you're going to hear the word parasociality a lot in place of parasocialism. I found several papers that use both, and I just went with, you know what, if this is going to beat my word count, God bless me. So just know that parasociality equals parasocialism because the terms are both jargon, but the proper term here is parasocial relationships. And with that, let's begin. The integration of monetization into video games continues to be an explored phenomenon in media despite its popularity. The perception of value has transcended the limitations of reality, and what is considered worth has been created, transformed, and materialized massively in the video gaming scene. Such is the case with the industry of the gacha games, which are video games that integrate the mechanic of using in-game currencies to earn a chance to randomly obtain a virtual item that the player can use and interact with throughout their gaming experience. This action is commonly referred to as pulling or rolling. According to Ismail et al., gacha games revolve around the concept of chance, in which players can receive non-monetary products that do not have a succinct equivalent market value and cannot be taken outside of the game's ecosystem. However, while marketing techniques are employed to ensure maximum profit and enjoyability from the audience, the aspect of interactivity that video games uniquely have opens a discussion to a deeper form of attachment that can be commodified. Parasociality in video games was described by Song and Fox as a simulacrum of a give-and-take conversation and intimacy. It is a false sense of a perceived face-to-face relationship between a spectator and an object of interest. While this phenomenon is mostly associated with media figures and their audience, parasociality can extend to any attachment with an object that cannot feasibly reciprocate the feelings of the other half. This is the case with people showing kinship, attachment, or identification with fictional characters. Stories and artistic narratives are meant to immerse the viewers into the world, and it is inevitable that strong sentimentalities will lead to attachment. However, parasociality in video game characters can be defined in two ways. The first is the narrative aspect in which players are attached to the characters themselves. This is when players identify with the written personality and aesthetics of the character, growing emotionally invested in their dialogue and expressions throughout the game. The second is the metagame aspect, in which players are attached to the characters as tools, rewards, and prizes. Players are attached to the idea that they have a unit worthy of their care and attention, instead of the actual character's personality. These are players who invest time and effort to build a character's abilities and strengthen them, as such obscuring their value of worth for that character. Parasociality is not necessarily a negative effect, as attachment is an inevitable social outcome, but it is important to consider the possible effects this could have in audiences who experience parasociality when playing gacha games. Gacha games primarily use characters as products, so establishing a connection can translate into higher profits. In this essay, the Chinese gacha game Genshin Impact will be scrutinized in how it employs different meta and in-game techniques to foster parasocial experiences between the characters and the audiences. Genshin Impact is a character-driven game released in 2020, and it currently has over 70 playable units. As of March 2023, Genshin Impact has earned over 3.6 billion total revenue, and has done several real-life events, conventions, and expos in both the Philippines and internationally. Furthermore, this paper will also investigate how such parasocial attachments can translate into monetization and purchase intention from the players. So let's begin with how Genshin fosters the parasocial experience. To integrate Genshin's fictionality and metagame perspectives, this essay will divide the attachment experience into 3 different levels: macroscopic, mesoscopic, and microscopic. Macroscopically, the first level of attachment is formed with the world building and establishment of lore in Genshin Impact. The world of Tivat is the primary setting of the game, and it is divided into 7 nations. However, while each nation is fictional, it takes inspiration from real-life cultures, people, and ideologies in order to expand on the literature of the world. The importance of emphasizing cultures as inspiration is that they become a gateway for audiences to much easily immerse themselves in the fictional world of Tivat. The benefit that Genshin Impact gains in integrating real-life cultures is twofold. Firstly, audiences who are already members of the represented culture can cathartically relate with the environment around them, as well as further establish connections that they may derive from personal experiences, ideologies, and attitudes. It is easier for them to have strong emotional connections to the fictional counterparts of their native cultures, whether they be positive or negative. The idea of identification refers to the imaginative process of assuming a perspective in a fictional world. Secondly, as for individuals who are not well versed with represented cultures, Genshin Impact becomes a preliminary form of exposure, albeit in a fictional sense. Audiences can use pre-established notions from real-life concepts to much easier understand foreign ones. Furthermore, Tivat also becomes more memorable because it blurs the boundaries between the real-world nations and the fictional counterparts. It is then much easier to insert these fictional characters into real-life settings and locations without it feeling too forced. Genshin Impact has done this by hosting numerous real-life events internationally. For example, an event that is centered around the mystical ice mountain in the game called Dragonspine is thematically appropriate for a marketing campaign in the Swiss Alps, where skiers can see and interact with various game-like exhibits. The mesoscopic level of attachment is through the utilization of the character's aesthetics, design, and visual elements to garner interest. In video games, the blending of visual and textual elements is key in establishing an immersive style. Video games are a narrative art form which uses multidimensional characters as pivotal instruments to translate the world's aesthetics, lore, and narratives. As such, understanding the basic elements of compelling character design may assist in the conversation of parasocialism. Characters invoking a sense of aesthetic have a nuanced form of attachment depending on the genre they are from. It is in HoYoverse's best interests that they successfully build audience interest and positive reception. The anime aesthetic allows for Genshin Impact characters to be conventionally pleasing to the eye. Each character has a notable silhouette with distinct color palettes and design choices. Lastly, to truly understand the manifestation of parasociality, it is crucial to understand how characters themselves can be a form of advertisements for the product by using intimacy as a bartering tool. On the microscopic level are the character interactions and perceived exposure that the players have. Constant exposures and interactions with anyone, real or otherwise, can improve the opinion that a person has for another. In relationship building, this is referred to as propinquity, which is a state of being close to someone or something through increased proximity. In video games, parasociality manifests stronger because the player is brought into the world itself and interacted with by the characters. For example, the player characters Aether and Lubine are considered friends, companions, and sometimes even objects of affection by the others, thus sharing intimate conversations or trust-building experiences throughout the game. As such, players are also exposed to that reception and can feel as though they are the recipients of such sentimentality. Genshin Impact implements compelling character quests in which the players learn heartfelt stories and sentimentalities in order to foster a realistic relationship that the audiences can empathize with. Furthermore, there are extensive voice lines, hangouts, and even events that the characters accompany the player through. All of these design factors are potential ways for players to value the characters enough to pay for them. While the rewards are fictional, the massive profit that HoYoverse receives from the player base should be indicative that such marketing techniques are working. As such, it is crucial to consider the perceived value that these characters may bring. Perceived value is defined as a person's evaluation of the product or a service, which can be weighed with either increased benefits or mitigating costs. The goal of parasociality with gacha game characters is to manifest the idea that these characters are worthy of being invested on, either time-wise or currency-wise. When the players derive a connection with these characters, they receive more incentives beyond just powerful units. For the purposes of this essay, it's important to focus on parasociality though as the main anchor for purchase intention. First is the hedonic value that these characters bring. Hedonic value is the evaluation of profit and loss through the arousal and enjoyment they receive from the product. Hedonic values are much more experiential and factor into the player's individualized criteria of enjoyment. Hedonic value is gained when audiences feel happy not only of their purchase, but also of their continued use of the products. The hedonic value of purchasing characters can be through the enjoyment of their abilities or the visual appeal of their design. Furthermore, because Genshin Impact is a gacha game, the overall satisfaction of beating the random odds can be enough to incentivize the thrill of rolling for the characters. There are players that simply purchase in-game currency in order to feel the thrive of the gacha. However, furthering on the parasocial connection, there also exists a phenomenon in which owning a character embellishes the connection that the player has with them. Genshin Impact teases characters before their release by dropping hints of their name and personality, so when the character is dropped, the hedonic value increases with the satisfaction of finally having their expectations pay off. There is unbridled joy with receiving a character that a player has worked for or has already been attached to previously in the story. Secondly, utilitarian value is depicted as the relationship of the product or service to efficiency and goal orientation. Genshin Impact is a hack-and-slash combat game where units attack monsters and perform combinations. As such, it is crucial for units to become stronger. Their connection to the characters may not be so rooted in personality or aesthetic, but instead in their combat capabilities. Regardless, the parasociality is manifested through the need of maintaining a standard of power, which can incentivize players to invest more. It becomes a sense of collective achievement when a character one is so emotionally invested in becomes a viable tool for completing the game. It is common in video game cultures to have favorite characters be the focus of resources and money. It is also possible that there becomes a continuous feedback loop that manifests higher purchase intention. For example, a character pulls for one copy of a unit and upgrades them to their fullest potential. Because of the investment of time, it is also possible that their perceived utilitarian value of the character increases. Furthermore, if the character is praised on social networking sites for its strength, a player who relies on effectiveness is further incentivized to pull further. The monetization aspect is that players can spend more in order to either obtain required materials for improvement faster or to pull for more copies of the character to linearly strengthen them. It is also possible to pull for weapons that the character uses, which only allows for another avenue of purchase. This in turn causes some people to thrive on the completionist aspect of quote-unquote perfecting the character's statistics. Thirdly, economic value is the emphasis on the perceived directness of the value of a product or service to the level of complexity it offers. This can be calculated through the relationship of the price versus the complexity of the character. Genshin Impact's 3D quality aesthetics, extensive voice lines, detailed character introductions, and unique ability sets reinforce the idea that players are paying for a product that was given love and attention by the creators. Furthermore, before the release of any character, Genshin Impact creates high-quality character promotional material where they are shown fighting mobs or creatures. Which is fascinating, however, is that because of the fictionality of Genshin Impact's characters, there is no concrete market value to determine the worth against each other. As such, there is an obfuscation of value, which now relies on the player to make the judgments independent of any objective number. Purchase intention increases when players feel more connected to the character, potentially relying on any subjective opinion then that they have formed prior to the character's release. Lastly, emotional value is the strongest manifestation of the parasociality becoming a monetization technique. Woods further suggests that objective value is not the primary goal of gacha players, as video games are media catered to escapism in emotive terms. Emotional value is manifested through the accomplishment of psychological needs such as attachment, companionship, romance, fulfillment, and social interactivity. However, there is a deeper psychological gratification between actually using a character versus simply watching them in cutscenes. Firstly, there is increased exposure to the character which gives off the illusion of intimacy, such that they are a part of your team accompanying you daily. Genshin Impact fans use the phrase, "this character came home" to refer to a newly acquired unit, which hones a level of domesticity versus just quote-unquote "I receive a character." Secondly, upon receiving characters, players also unlock companionship levels, signature dishes that the character can cook, voice lines unlock which directly speak to the player character, and the background stories of the units. This can create a social reality in which the players have become closer to the unit and understand their secrets. Thirdly, players can also begin identifying with characters, as such believing that the perfection of a character's performance in combat or other mechanical aspects of the game is integral to their perception of self-worth. It also then becomes self-gratifying to purchase units that players believe reflect their own characteristics and personality, or even in some cases, people that they wish they were intimate with in real life. There also becomes a perceived moral obligation for the player to adequately treat characters they like with respect by not neglecting them. Genshin Impact players have expressed distress when the characters they usually use or main is not optimized, believing that they have failed or disappointed the character. This in turn leads to sentimentality of purchasing weapons and materials to increase the character's effectiveness. This also incentivizes buying materials with real-life currency to hasten the process of leveling up. With all of these values combined, Genshin Impact finds clever tactics to incentivize the players to purchase more for their characters. Gacha in video games brings to light unorthodox marketing techniques that are unique to the interactive potential that gaming can provide. Unlike traditional media, investment is much more strongly commodified. While it is not inherently a bad aspect of gacha games, it is crucial to still be wary of the existence of such techniques. It can be tempting to immerse oneself in fiction without understanding the psychology behind it. But with a gaming genre that preys heavily on the emotional impulses and rationality of the audiences, the risks of unprecedented purchase can be deadly. It is naive to say that gaming companies are not already aware of the psychological impacts that certain mechanisms provide, especially with decades of market research. As such, awareness and discipline continue to be the necessary traits that audiences must have when playing such games. And that's the full paper! For context, this is going to be given to a professor that has never heard of gacha games, is not a gamer, and has never heard of Genshin Impact. So if you notice, my paper did have to explain a lot of the mechanics. I wasn't allowed to name drop any characters. I wasn't allowed to also use jargon that would be very specific to us, like I didn't say wish, I didn't say primogems. I also had to focus on parasociality as my main anchor into the values. The reason for this paper is I honestly just wanted to know if there really was a relationship between the 4 values that you can get and incentivize you to play more and pay more versus, you know, the connections that you get with the characters. And I'm happy to say that, yeah, there is. It's probably not as strong, for example, and not everyone sees its R5s, but the fact that a good chunk of people have invested so much emotions into Genshin Impact to the point that they are willing to spend for it is actually really fascinating. Whether you're a completionist meta slave, or you're someone like me that likes the lore, or you just like the characters, everyone has their own different values of what they perceive as quote-unquote worth their money. And if you're free to play, then unfortunately you're not part of this conversation. Or at the very least, you probably have self-control. Or you don't see the economic value of C6 R5ing all of your characters, or just having multiple copies, or rolling for everyone. But that doesn't mean that it's universal for everyone. What I find fascinating is that Genshin Impact has masterfully used these tactics in order to basically mind control us into paying more for Kave's ass. Anyway, my name is Aster and I hope that you enjoyed.